Welcome. It's so great to be with all of you today. My name is Margaret Dawson. I'm the Chief Digital Officer at Red Hat. And with me is...
Hi, I'm Chris Pinella. I am the Director of the Open Innovation Labs program for Red Hat here in North America. And welcome to Margaret and our session.
Thanks so much. And today we're going to talk about digital transformation, but specifically the elements of digital transformation that involve human connection. And we've established what we call the 6 human factors that we want to explore. And this is really a discussion. And I wish we were face to face because I'm sure it would be very dynamic and you'd have all kinds of opinions. So we'll try to channel you as we go through this and make it a discussion. And you know, at the highest level, it's quite ironic that we're doing this. When we first wrote this abstract, and we've actually talked about this with a lot of customers together, so it's fun to do this presentation right now, but we always talk about the need for that human connection. And one of the things I always say is I show a slide that says a digital handshake cannot replace the real thing. So amid this current environment, we looked at this, our slide deck, and we're like, this isn't going to work because we're actually saying a digital handshake must replace the real thing right now. And why is that so important? And if you think about it, think of all the times when you do give someone a handshake, especially a firm handshake. I'm one of those people. I have a serious issue with any kind of fish handshake, when it's kind of that limp hand, because it doesn't build trust, right? It tells you if that person has that kind of handshake, it says something to you that somehow they don't trust you or they're not confident, even if they're just trying to be nice. But there's that firm handshake that tells you, okay, we're making a connection. For some people, if you're from the Midwest, I lived in Detroit a long time growing up, a handshake meant it's a deal. And that's all it took. And you build that trust through that human connection. So what do we do now? Obviously, we can't do that. We have to have a digital handshake. We have to work together virtually. And we still have to build trust. And I love this quote from Daniel Newman, who's a principal analyst at the Futurum Research Company, because he says, in a climate that is uncertain, where there's also aggressive innovation, and if you think about it, even though this was written before this time, it's exactly where we are. We have more uncertainty and change than maybe we've ever had before, but we can't stop innovating. We can't stop learning new things. We can't stop training our people. And the only thing that is stable throughout all this as we go through this is trust. And of course, avoiding the distractions. We had to put something fun in here because how do you actually focus on innovation and trust when your biggest concern is whether or not you have toilet paper for the rest of the day? So we thought we'd have some fun on this. Usually the distraction is the latest technology hype. And whether it's containers, I think I'm actually wearing my Containers Are Linux t-shirt today, or Kubernetes or serverless or Istio or whatever your hype phrase is of the day. But now we, of course, have just regular life to distract us. So let's look back. Where were we before all of this happened? The fact that we are in change and we are going through this transformation is not new. In fact, a lot of people say that this is not even our first digital transformation. It's our second or probably our third if we really looked back at the last few decades. And every year we've been doing this research. I think we've been asking this specific question in the last 3 years when everyone was really getting into digital transformation. And we asked, where is your company in this transformation? And perhaps not surprisingly, although it has increased a lot over the last couple of years, is the majority are in full transformation. So if you think about that, you are looking to new technologies. You're starting to implement new technologies and processes and maybe even full in on DevOps and some other things. And so 34% are in that full transforming stage. 25% are still emerging. So they're figuring it out. They're starting to use new technologies and processes. 12% say they're leading. And what that means is they actually think they have a competitive edge and they have used technology to gain that. And they have gone through the vast, stage of transformation. And I should be clear that this isn't just one per company, right? You could be leading in one part of your company and actually emerging in another. And that's totally normal. Not to mention it's a cycle, right? You could be leading one moment, say right now, and then all of a sudden you've got to go back to, I don't even know what my strategy is. So think of this really in a very agile incremental cycle. The ones I always get a little perplexed, 9% having not yet started, That's probably pretty realistic. It was around, 20% when we started this. 10% is not, unlikely. But the 9% that say they have zero plans to change, that group concerns me, right? The fact that almost 10%, and this is of about 1,000 of Red Hat customers globally, worldwide IT and business decision makers, are saying, yeah, we're good. No transformation needed here. And I honestly can't imagine what industry that would be in. As we think about priorities with transformation, innovation has consistently showed up first for the past 3 or 4 years. I will say the good news is we're starting to see a gain in these other areas around user experience, skill set, et cetera. But this goes back to the distraction of technology. We think that technology alone is going to help us transform. And that if we can just implement it faster, if we can just give developers what they need a little bit faster, then somehow the rest of it will take care of itself. And then simplicity is right after that. And if you think about it, that's almost a yin yang, right? How do we innovate and move fast, but keep it simple? But that's exactly what we need to do to truly transform. And one of the biggest blockers is technical debt. And it's not new that we've consistently had to do more with less, or that we have to struggle with our legacy IT and somehow still innovate. But clearly, this is the biggest pain for enterprises and governments all over the world that just need to somehow get out from underneath that so they can move that investment to greater innovation and start to transform even more. The other thing is, we know that organizations that were starting this transformation, this happens to be a statistic specifically in the public sector from McKinsey, but I've seen very similar numbers, 75, 80%, whatever it is, that initial transformation efforts were actually quite challenging. And a lot of that is because we did not set mutual expectations. And we're going to talk about some of this before, is like, why are we seeing disruptive technologies that are implemented not necessarily meeting expectations? And then if we look at, where we are now, what are the big things that we're hearing from customers around digital transformation or just survival right now, Chris?
Well, Margaret, as you mentioned, you and I have had the opportunity to survey customers around the globe in the past couple months, and they really are falling into really three big themes right now. One, a segment of business has really dropped off and they're under threat. The travel industry is a good example of that. Folks who are really working to protect their current business model and prepare for the future, banks, FSI is an excellent example there. And then those faced with massive scaling and capability demands. Right. State governments, unemployment is seeing a surge, healthcare. I mean, those are really the obvious ones. And, each one has unique challenges in terms of what they're looking at, in terms of how they're looking at innovation and what that means to them. Unfortunately, disruption right now is transformation, whether companies acknowledge it or not. And, we're just seeing that theme around the globe. But what does that really translate into, in our discussions? It really is, how do I make my organization more resilient? What can I do so that we are never in this situation of massive disruption again? And, where the gaps are becoming very obvious in these industries, from things as simple as teams not used to working distributed and remote, to, like you just alluded to, what is my business strategy moving forward to maintain customer relevance? And then as part of that, security right now is really top of mind. We're starting to see in the industry more stories, unfortunately, about data breaches around, opportunistic folks trying to just, capitalize on the amount of confusion and disruption that's happening right now across all organizations and segments, quite honestly. Yeah. So, this really, kind of drives the fact that your technology goals cannot be business as usual today. If you're looking for resiliency, what does that mean? Across your platforms, across your teams in terms of efficiencies, as well as, what can you do on a smaller level to test out some innovation, within your business to see, is this going to help drive a larger path forward? So, business as usual is now business as unusual. And, it certainly needs some strategic thinking and ability to really, think quick and act small to try to, pilot some solutions out. And when we talk to our customers, we talk along the lines of open architecture, open processes, and more open organizations and culture. And right now, this disruption is really driving those conversations quite a bit. Like I said, I was on a call with a customer last night who said, we're okay, actually, culturally, like we're used to working distributedly, but we're really inefficient. Like I don't understand, our processes need to change. And we realized, we need to actually take a harder look at our cloud architecture because it's actually not supporting our new ways of doing business. And we're seeing that gap of where we thought we had everything covered suddenly come into a glaring light where we are now in a position where we're scrambling. So that's just, one example of things that we're hearing out in the industry.
Yeah, I think that's a great explanation or description of what some people are facing with. I think also so often we think about the technology just serving the business. And I love this story from Singapore, and it's not a new story. They did this over 2 years ago, but it seems almost more relevant now than it was then, in that this was an organization in Singapore, the technology agency. They started doing some hackathons, some hackfests with community people. And they built this program where they were inviting students and really anyone that wanted to help create new applications based on challenges they saw in this city state. And if you know anything about Singapore, it's very crowded. There isn't a lot of, room to explore and whatever. And infrastructure is a challenge sometimes. And one of the applications that came out of these hackathons was an app that helped emergency response save more lives. And the specific challenge was those emergency response personnel actually couldn't get to the people, especially with heart attacks, soon enough. And so people were dying because they couldn't get through the streets, they couldn't get through the parks, whatever it was. So this application actually was like an alert system. And it was an app you could download on everyone's phone. And emergency personnel, doctors, nurses, anyone that's trained could register on this application. And then there was a secondary part of the app that hospitals and emergency personnel had. And then they put defibrillators all over the city. And the locations of those would show up on this app. And the first time that it kind of was tested was a gentleman was running through one of the parks in Singapore. They have beautiful parks all over, and had a heart attack and collapsed. And someone saw it, hit the app. Turns out a doctor was across the park playing tennis, got the alert, ran over there, grabbed a defibrillator that happened to be on the way. I mean, it was like one of those perfect situations, but kept the man alive until the ambulance could get there. And the gentleman who represented the agency at our summit 2 years ago got on stage and said within the last, I don't know what it was, 6 months or a year, they had saved something like 72 lives. And he became very emotional. And this is, a government agency official in the country of Singapore. And it was just amazing. And so as we think about this, transformation is not just about making us more efficient or making our business run better. We can actually be thinking about how it helps our employees, how it helps our customers, how it helps society overall. And I think that's something that, we're all wanting to do more of right now. And that goes to the ultimate human factor, which is people. And one of the things that we have seen with what I would call a digital leader is that they really focus on the people practices. And I love this quote from McKinsey, that people practices are the decisive factor between success and failure. And so we're going to dig into that more with these 6 human factors. And we'll go through each of these. And at the end of the day, they're all, created to build trust and create that common purpose. So Chris, let's start with your favorite, open culture.
Absolutely. So, open culture is, really built on open source. Now, if you think about open source projects, they're distributed. They are, around the globe. They are, different languages, different points of view. They are self-governing and self-managing. It's not like there's one, set of management practices overhead that are saying, you must create this project in this way. So they really need to figure out, collectively how they can collaborate and communicate. And, I've had the opportunity to be part of several open source large projects. And, it is a struggle because you do have quite a few opinions that need to be taken into consideration. But, transparency and sharing problems, is just, really interesting to watch how, there's not a email chain of like, you must answer this. It's people generally want to help solve problems. And they recognize that if they work together, they can build better together. Within these projects, going on globally. And again, they're not all part of one company. They've got different points of view. They work on these projects because they feel like they're tools that they want to actually use out in, their day to day, and think others will as well. So, there's quite a bit to be learned here, from, the open source culture and what that could mean for an organization. Now, going back to Daniel Newman, this quote about culture being the operating system, for your organization, I think is really great. It's really a strong, stop and think about, what are you asking your organization to do? Back in February, when we could still travel, I had the opportunity to attend several dinners in North America with small groups of CIOs across different market verticals. And we were talking about some of the challenges about getting teams to transform. And it was very eye-opening to me to be in this room of, accomplished CIOs, and the verbiage coming out of their mouths across the table was, well, my teams have to change. How do I get my teams to change? And at one point, I looked up across the table, and I did this in both of the dinners I was in. I said, well, what are you as leaders doing to propagate the culture that you want to see within your organization? Mm. And that stopped them cold. That really gave them pause for thought, because, be the change that you want to see. You've heard that in the industry over and over. The way to define this operating system for your culture is think about what you would like it to be and start being that change. So, as we talk about this, I recognize we can, we say all these, great things about culture but really putting it into practice is, kind of where you really learn a lot about how the impacts are going to look for your organization.
You totally made me think of that Michael Jackson song. I'm going to start with the man in the mirror. It's perfect. But it's true. That's what you're saying, right? You're saying we have to start with ourselves, which as leaders, sometimes that's hard to do.
Exactly. Now, obviously, and very luckily, we wrote the book on the open organization. And, we speak about this a lot with our customers. What does an open organization look like? Margaret, you and I have been in many scenarios where we've been in customer meetings and we just see how closed they are. We've been in customer meetings where the executives have not met one another because they're distributed and have introduced themselves. So you see inherently that it's very easy to create silos and swim lanes and, fiefdoms of control that, folks have within businesses, whether they're artificial or, necessary across lines of business. They occur naturally. We've worked very hard as Red Hat to preserve our open culture, I believe. We really aim to be collaborative, to be participatory. We have a great meritocracy in place, and our community is very strong. We encourage ideas, across, our full organization. Now, organizations that I meet, they're not immediately going to adopt all of these. But when I speak with them, what I really encourage them is pick one or two that you would like to work on and see what that change means for your organization, whether it is encouraging more collaboration and collaborative ways of working, or being more transparent as a leader out to your team and really encouraging that within your team, to really drive, expanding into better ways of working across the board to really facilitate that innovation that companies are striving for. Culture really drives folks to, think differently about the ways they work. One of my favorite things I like to say when I meet with customers is everyone in your organization has an idea as to how to make their job better. So, going back to the survey, here's another data point about embracing more open principles and where they are and sort of their evolution. And, given what's happened in the past few months, it's interesting about, kind of what this data is showing us, not yet or just beginning to think about being more open, no plans to evolve, and then some that are unsure. Well, guess what? My hypothesis is that these are the most disrupted companies currently, really across the, across the industries, because they really haven't thought outside of what their organizations could look like in a different scenario. Whereas some of the ones who are leading and probably looking at transforming have at least piloted some ways of, really differently working and being able to support, their own business resiliency. So, I'm curious if we reran this survey today, what that would look like.
No, that would be very interesting.
Indeed. And one of the things that we use, and, we'll tie it back into, some discussion later in our presentation here, is the Open Decision Framework. We find this to be very powerful within Red Hat because we are involving stakeholders in decisions. One of the, most flummoxing things to me when I talk to customers and, recognizing that we started out as an infrastructure and platform company at Red Hat is when customers say to us, well, we built this great platform, but we can't get our developers to use it. And it's the Field of Dreams problem. And I was like, well, did you involve them? No. I was like, well, if you had engaged them within the process, they would understand how to use that and probably have provided you feedback into like the ways of working. So that's really one, example of, opening up to a broader network of your stakeholders can just drive better solutions. Recognizing that, yes, not everyone is going to agree all the time, and there needs to be a set, delineation of how the decision is getting made. But understanding the 360 view helps you create the platform to make a better decision, I believe. And I love this quote from Simon Sinek. Open organizations are built on trust. Well, trust is built on telling people the truth, not what they want to hear. And, I firmly believe when I'm speaking to customers, I do them a disservice if I'm not being honest with them. I talk to customers quite frequently about, the ways that Red Hat, can help or partner with them. And, when they are just really technology focused and driven, I'm fairly upfront about, well, are your teams ready to change? Are you ready to change as leaders? Because, not only are you looking at, technology to support and enable your business initiatives and new ways of working, but what about the people? What about the people change? And, again, that's just one area where, I'm really trying to propagate just being upfront and honest and saying, it's great that you want to undergo this digital transformation journey, but it is more than just deploying a new platform. So.
And to be fair, we could say that about ourselves too, because we love our platforms, and sometimes we forget about developers too. So it's something we all could look in the mirror about. And I think that's the perfect segue to this, which is around a vision. One of the things that I see with digital leaders is that before they ever went through their transformation or started to invest heavily in these new technologies or processes, is they started with a destination. What is it we're trying to do? Where do we want to end up? How do we know if we're going to be successful? And this vision was not just top down, kind of building on that open culture. The vision was something that everyone shared in. And to be honest, as Chris mentioned, that is the only way that we can move forward is if people feel that they are part of that destination. And then they can also have a filter. Everything they're doing can be analyzed or evaluated with that vision as, does this help us achieve this? Does us move this closer to our vision? And, when we think about what is a great vision, I actually like the last point here more than anything. It becomes a rallying cry. And right now we need these rallying cries. But it is future focused, right? It's not destinational in where you want to be next month. It's, if we do all these things, this is where we'll be in 12, 18, 24 months. And it's got to be based on your core values. And as we look at culture, as an organization culturally, do you have an established set of core values that you share? We all have core values that we think about personally, but it's very powerful when you see an organization, whether it be a nonprofit, a government, an enterprise, whatever it is, share a set of values that inform everything they do. And then finally, make the vision memorable. And that kind of goes to the rallying cry too, right? Don't make it so complicated that nobody can remember it. And so think about, have you established a vision based on your shared values, based on this cultural transformation that you're trying to make to bring everything into it? And I will tell you, back to the rallying cry, now more than ever, I have seen this incredible hunger that people want and need to be inspired. They want to inspire each other, and they want their leaders to inspire and be inspiring. And I just put a few examples that really stood out to me. And if you look at Ford, here is an organization and an industry that is under that pressure. Their very business model is being challenged. People aren't driving like they were. So what did they do? They completely reset their vision for this next period to say, we are going to help save the world. Our manufacturing plants are going to start doing face shields. We're going to start figuring out how to leverage the resources we have in a totally different way. And they pivoted so quickly. And again, yes, I might be biased because I did live in Detroit. My dad worked for Ford, but I love watching these very traditional organizations that have been around for a long time pivot on a dime when something happens, which is extremely hard to do, even for startups. If you look what Lego is doing and really being true to their core values about play and creativity and all of that and what they're doing. And then Wipro, right? So these were global examples that I literally found, and you could find dozens of them, where leaders and organizations are changing their short-term mission, but becoming inspired, and it's still true to their long-term vision and to the values that they've established. So with that vision, you need to add metrics. Everyone loves to measure success. I think the important thing around this is what you are measuring changes. And if you think about an IT department, a CIO, a CTO, or the leadership there, we're so used to measuring operational efficiency, right? What's our SLAs? How are we doing in the data center? Or, more measurements that are looking at our IT efficiencies. And what needs to be measured with this vision is business outcome based. And this is something we all struggle with. I will tell you, just from our own products and technologies area, it's much easier for us to measure things that are in control of our engineering departments, right? But if we are going to actually build things that customers care about and that are responding to the scenarios and use cases that they're trying to use this technology to address, we have got to measure things from a business outcome. So think about, as you're putting this together, it's got to be something with the line of business, with your functional lines, with your agencies, and across teams, and measurements that you all care about that at the end of the day can show whether your business has been successful, not just your technology. And they can't be business as usual goals. If you normally would sign up for a 10% improvement, then the metric with this vision is 100%. Or 25% or 50%. And if you haven't seen McKinsey's roadmap for digital transformation, it's really an awesome white paper and kind of practice that they are doing. And it stresses a lot about these measurements of success. So not only measuring different things that are focused on business outcome, but measurements that make everyone stretch and think beyond just, business as usual.
And, moving beyond business as usual, it really is important, Margaret, to also, look at building cross-organizational teams.
Absolutely.
And, being able to propagate that vision of why we're doing this. Anytime we meet with a customer, one of our first questions is, well, why? Why are you looking to change? What initiatives? Why is this important to you? What do you need to do? And, like I just alluded to, we hear a lot of, well, my teams need to change. Well, this is an organizational wide initiative, like when you start to propagate change out. And, why is this important to think about, breaking down silos across, countries, provinces, management functions? Well, let me give you an example. I had the opportunity to speak with a mid-size healthcare company in North America a couple weeks ago, and I was talking to the CIO, and he said to me, we're, on a good day in the office, we have problems communicating and collaborating. We are afraid to talk to our business users because our processes are so broken. Anything we release into production fails and creates fires for us. And Red Hat, we need your help. How can you help us now that we are distributed? This is really exasperating the problem, as well as, we recognize we need to look at our hybrid. We need to seriously move into a hybrid cloud solution and facilitate better ways of working. Now, I was on the phone with the CIO and his directors, and they were mostly aligned on this call. So fast forward a week where we start a consulting engagement with them. Well, these directors had neglected to tell their team what the vision was for our program to work together. And so we spent about 5 days just getting the team level folks into alignment because, the communication failed between the upper and mid management and the actual folks who were going to be diving into, help propagate this work forward and create better outcomes for the business. And so, those types of things, I unfortunately, we run into them, across our line of work. But 5 days is a business cost. It's a cost of innovation. It's a cost of, your associates' time and energy. And, how do you look at reducing that and really understanding, what communication collaboration looks like, even on a small pilotable level is just important.
Hey, Chris, could I give another example of this? You made me think of another one that on the government side. And I think this is a great way to use Red Hat, by the way, is allow us to be the brokers if you can't figure out how to do it. And as you know, we experience ourselves that vendors sometimes can bring together these different groups when you can't even do it internally. But this happens in governments. The example I think of a lot here is I was working with the CIOs of every province of a country, and they barely could look at each other. They were in the conference room together, and they could not barely look at each other. And we were talking about digital transformation at the country level, and there was a country CIO, of course. Mm-hmm. And we tried to talk about how do you come together with a shared vision, and it finally came out that they couldn't do that because they were competing for resources. So each province had a vision and was going through digital transformation, but to actually come together and attempt to have one shared meant they would be giving up something for each of their own areas. And so if you are that broader CIO or even one of those, that's got to be broken. Like that's the really hard work where somebody's got to stand up and say, you know what, this is the right thing to do for our organization, for our country, for our province, for our whatever it is, our team. It can be at a very micro or macro level, but that brokering of collaboration, that breaking down the silos, the willingness to say, you know what, I'm going to give up A so that we can all go towards B. That is the kind of leadership we need more than ever right now. And it doesn't matter how senior you are. This is happening, all over the world across all types of companies and organizations.
I agreed. Exactly like you said, it's endemic across quite a few of our customers and conversations. And of course, the new Kingmaker came out a while ago, and again, just coming from the discussion that we just had about folks not wanting to give up something to better their vision. the example that I just gave about just the teams not even being aligned. Your developers are very key, to your organization. They're the ones who are executing on your vision. They're part of that team that is getting, whether it's a feature set of a product out or, an update to information to your end customer. And again, every organization have ideas as to how they can make, their ways of working better within teams. How do they pull in, infrastructure to be more, aligned with their work? I know it's an important facet when you're thinking about these cross-collaborative teams is to really pull everyone in. And then, the Accelerate book. We see customers walk in and throw this book on the table and says, we need this. Okay, well, let's figure out what this looks like for your organization. Because this book, there's a lot of great research in this book. However, again, it's not like making widgets. When you go into an organization, you're looking across these metrics, this way of doing DevOps. It's not one size fits all, because with culture, with the ways of working, with lines of business we need to support, we really need to say, okay, if you want to collect these, let's understand your ways of working, how we can better communicate and collaborate, and then what do these metrics mean to you within that context? And then I think that's, challenging for some organizations to understand, because we do hear like, oh, we tried to be DevOps, we tried to be more agile, and it failed. And a lot of times I'm like, well, why? And like, well, we just kind of instituted it. And I was like, well, did you think through? It's not like you wake up one morning and be like, all right, now we're going to do DevOps. Well, you need to spend some time thinking about what does that mean for your organization and how do you want to enact and roll it out? And I love this map. I love focusing on user experience, whether these are your internal teams, developers, or your customers. This Rail Europe map is awesome because it shows the customer journey and process and touch points where you have opportunities to interact with them, and looking at that value proposition along the way, regardless of if you're on a train and you're stopping to get a meal or make a phone call or, use the facilities, that's a journey and an experience. How do you take advantage of that value prop? Same as, developing any kind of product internally. How does that value prop move through your organization system, and what are the important touch points to understand? The vision that Margaret was talking about really should align to your end customer success. Given the amount of disruption and turbulence, we are now playing infinite games with customers, both internally and externally. We need to understand, how do we support, what the customer's needs are and generate that long-term relationship. And, the infinite game is really about recognizing that there is no endpoint, that you are constantly in a state of needing to continuously analyze, improve, and make adjustments. Leaders that do this have proven better results, whether building organizations or building end value to their customers who are their business. It's a hard concept for a lot of folks to think about adopting, but if you tie it back to just the general concept of continuous improvement, you start to get there with that, ability to understand and kind of play that infinite game. And lastly, what can you do now to give your customers a reason to return? How do we serve them better today than we did yesterday? And that should really be part of that rallying cry of the vision. What can we do to continuously, be better partners with our customers, whether they are internal or, external facing? And then, as part of this in an organization, we really need to understand, developing and training people. So going back to those dinners that I mentioned earlier, around, discussing cultural challenges, the top topic that all of these CIOs really wanted to discuss was development, hiring, and retention of their folks. Just given that these were smaller markets, we were having these dinners in, the talent pool was very finite. How do they, they said, okay, how do we figure out what skills our, associates need for this new way of working, for any kind of transformation we're going to take under? How do we keep them interested? There's folks coming out of colleges that don't want to work on these crusty legacy applications. And, how do we keep them engaged while we're figuring out our strategy? It's complex. And, again, we talked about this in light of, what does this look like within your digital transformation strategy? Because, again, it's about asking your folks to make a leap, take on something new, think about new ways of working, guiding them through change and upskilling at the same time. And they all tie in together with, an organization's success. I was, again, on the phone, part of the conversation last night I was having with this customer. He was really about, the infrastructure and, needing to look at the hybrid cloud. And I said, well, are your teams ready? Are they interested in learning? Are they excited about the idea of a new technology and a new way of working? Stop the conversation dead in its tracks. I need to think about that. I said, yes, you've got your portfolio prioritized and you have an idea of business wise, what's impactful. Are the teams that support these ready to go along with it? That's worth stopping and just, some consideration first, as part of this. And then what do you need to get them there based off of where they are? What was the last time they were upskilled?
Well, and I'd say this is more important than ever. I mean, we're having a lot of organizations, even if they are having to literally contract from their normal business operations, this may be a time to focus on training. So often we don't have time, or we feel like we don't have time to do that. But, can we use this opportunity to reinvest, to, reskill, to upskill our workforce and teach them new technologies? And I mean, this is one of the reasons usually I don't plug products and services in these conversations, but I will say we're doing a lot of more free training. And this was why, as customers are coming to us right now and saying, can you help me with training? And so, how do we just open up the gates, so to speak, with all this content that we have to facilitate more of this? But think about this right now. If your people aren't fully utilized, and you have the fortune of hopefully still being able to pay them or pay them something, can you use this so they can get new skills and they may be able to help you more, not only now, but when you come out of this, you then have a higher skilled workforce. Just something to consider.
Absolutely. And, not giving them the opportunity to skill really, costs money, because you are playing catch up, you're behind the eight ball. You want everyone to participate. You don't want to have to stop and think, once you're down the road of this change, realizing, oh no, the impact is costing us again time, which equates to money in these scenarios. So, I think this quote from, about the skills gap impacting GDP is very, very timely. Open source is a great way to think about, just talent in general. Now, recognizing that, it's not necessarily just about encouraging folks to either participate in an open source project. Maybe there's an in-source project within your organization that you could rally a group around to create your own community of tools or some kind of product set. I do hear that fairly frequently. We may not be able to contribute to the Open Origins project. However, we want to build some tools internally. Can we create our, what does open source internally look like for our groups as another way to allow, peers to kind of upskill each other and co-create something valuable for the company? Again, tools that would help them, with the next set of innovation, and as well as, give them the opportunity to feel like they're participating in something bigger besides, their day-to-day job. So, there's a lot of goodness that you can draw that doesn't necessarily just directly translate into, contributing externally. There's ways to funnel that same, methodology internally to provide value to organizations. And build diverse and inclusive teams. It kills me that in 2020, Margaret, we still have to talk about this. It just does.
But again, we're not talking about just gender, race, or geography. The thing about this that I love is that this is about different styles, different perspectives. It could be different generations, right? The point is inclusivity really means inclusivity. Like, I think sometimes we get too striated in this and what it means.
That's very, very true. And, the data, and the fact that there's been research around it, Forbes has done some, and some of the other, Gartners of the world have done it as well, about, these cross-functional and diverse teams being much more, productive, making better decisions and having better outcomes. And, who wants to look around a room and see exactly the same person in the mirror reflected across around a conference table or on a video call these days? Again, shared perspectives drive better solutions. So, when you're thinking about your teams and your projects, keep the view of inclusivity as part of it as well.
And finally, make it personal. And this kind of goes back to the handshake that we started with, is that normally when we talk about this is how do we develop better personal relationships? And, normally when we talk about that, I say, so get out there, walk the floor, as we used to say in the old days. I don't know if people still say that anymore. Feels very, very 70s. But the point is that we still need to get out there. And what I have found has been working internally and with some of the customers and partners that I talk to is actually over pivoting on leaders getting out there, having kind of open forum sessions, excuse me, or open Q&As where you just, go on whatever your favorite web platform is and just spend time and take questions from your teams and find out what they're concerned about and look at everybody's bedrooms, living rooms, offices. We're all working from dining room tables in my case right now. And what does that mean? And I think there is an opportunity that we can take here of getting to know people's lives and how people operate that maybe we've never had to before, that will absolutely help us be better leaders, be better companies, be better organizations. But at the end of the day, change does not happen unless people feel that you as a leader and that the organization as a whole are personally invested. Mm-hmm. And the only way to do that is through personal connections, which goes back to the whole point we started on, because it's all about trust. And I think it's important to also say that it's not just the what. So whether the what is a technology, the what is your digital transformation, the what is what you build or manufacture or deliver, the how you do it becomes more and more important. Mm-hmm. And the how is what starts to build that trust and starts to build that connection. And what I would challenge us all to think about, and it's so amazing to me because this is a book I read months and months ago, and I've used it in multiple presentations and interactions, is this challenge everyone to become double bottom line companies. And what double bottom line companies mean, and the Gershenfelds created this term and wrote this book. And if you haven't read this, I would highly recommend it, especially now. But it's about companies that both are focused on positive financial return and meaningful social impact. And their whole point, kind of we brought up earlier, is that this is not a zero-sum game. It's not about profitability versus social good. So, governments obviously, ideally, are thinking about this all the time. How do we balance our budget and still have great social programs? But as every organization, private or public, the how is, how do we do these things together? How do we care about our associates, our employees, and still drive towards business? And the answer is, by doing both, you will. Because the more you care about people, the more they are inspired and the more they want to make a difference and build the business. And the other thing that is in this book that I thought was incredibly relevant right now is just imagine if during the first two digital revolutions, there had been as much social innovation as technology and science innovation. And I think we are actually seeing a forcing factor right now in social innovation that is parallel with our science and technology. And in fact, they are intersecting. And science and technology innovation is for social innovation, which I don't think we've ever seen in this way. So how do we come out of this and continue to transform with that combination, with that balance, that yin yang, so to speak, of the technology and social being hand in hand holistically?
Yes, and then moving, in conjunction with the what and the how, it's important not to forget the why. Mm-hmm. The why is absolutely vital. It is, feeding back into your vision statement. Your customers, your teams, they won't buy into whatever it is that you are producing without understanding the why. And what is your why? Again, going back to conversations we have with customers, Margaret, where we're saying, why are you doing this?
Right.
We the what and the how, we can help you get to the why. What are you asking, folks to take on or buy into? And we do this at Red Hat as well. Every couple of years, we look internally and ask ourselves, we poll using our open decision framework and say, what is our Red Hat why? Is our why still relevant to the way that we are operating and doing business today? And, the last round that we did a couple of years ago, we came up with a new version of our why. Red Hat's why unlocks the world's potential. And, that's compelling. We can internally, it's our rallying cry. Externally, we can talk to customers about how that means, in terms of how we help partner with them. It's very powerful. We understand and we live behind our why. And, we've been asking organizations throughout this, presentation to think about what is their why.
Yeah. And I think you touched on something really important, that this why statement did not come from the CEO. In fact, the CEO had a different why statement that was his favorite, and his didn't win. And I think that's the point, is that a why cannot be a top-down mandate. It has to use that open decision framework. And what I will tell you is that this was a months-long process to get feedback and input and stories and votes. I mean, we actually took this to the company 2-3 times as we narrowed it down. And when we finally got a winner, everyone felt like they had created this. And what I would say is, right or wrong, whether you think it's perfect or not, it doesn't really matter. But I will tell you, you can ask any Red Hatter and they can tell you what this why statement is. And that's the power, behind this. And so as we end this presentation, and I so appreciate you joining us, and I hope this has been enjoyable. I hope you've maybe gotten a new perspective, or if nothing else, been entertained for 50 minutes. But think about, what is your why? And this could be your personal why. This could be your team why. This can be your organizational why. I find it really helpful to start with my own personal and share that with my team. And then you can create a team why, and maybe it'll bubble up and it can be an organic, open source way of coming up with an organizational why, or it might be parallel paths. But without this backing and a vision that aligns with it, it's really hard to get organizations through transformation and to reach that destination that we all want to get to. And for some of us, it's coming back to that again. And as we come out of this. So again, thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. Such a joy always to be with you. Indeed. And hopefully we'll see all of you face to face soon. And if not, I hope we'll see you virtually for coffee or happy hour sometime. So thank you so much.
Yep. Thanks for joining us today.